Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling something really central to education, grading, and feedback. It's absolutely vital for learning, but let's be honest, for educators, it's often just a massive time sink.
It really is, and that's what we're exploring today, how AI is stepping into this space. We're using insights from some specific source material, excerpts from a document called How AI Automates Grading and Revolutionizes Student Feedback.
Right, and our mission here is to unpack what that material tells us about AI's potential in assessment, not just like robot grading, but how it could change the whole feedback experience.
Exactly. The core idea presented isn't about replacing teachers at all. It's more about potentially giving them a really powerful assistant, a tool to help manage that workload and maybe even improve the feedback itself.
Yeah, that idea of instant feedback, detailed, constructive. It feels pretty revolutionary compared to, waiting days or weeks sometimes.
It really does. And a lot of this is possible because of the huge strides in AI, particularly natural language processing. As of today, June 7th, 2025, these aren't just theories anymore. They're starting to become practical tools.
Okay, so let's lay out the journey for this deep dive. What are we going to cover?
Well, we'll start with the problems, right? The traditional challenges that make grading so tough.
Makes sense.
Then we'll get into the how AI actually works for different types of assessments. Multiple choice, sure, but also the tricky stuff like essays.
And the benefits for students, for teachers.
Definitely. We need to cover those. But crucially, we also have to look at the limitations, the risks, the ethical questions. That's super important.
Absolutely. And then wrap up with what the source suggests is the ideal path forward.
Yeah, this idea of a human-AI partnership seems to be the key takeaway.
Okay, sounds like a plan. So before we jump into the AI side, let's really nail down those traditional challenges. What does our source material highlight as the main pain points with grading and feedback the old-fashioned way?
Well, the first one is just unavoidable, isn't it? The immense time commitment.
Right.
Grading is, as the source says, notoriously time-consuming. It eats up evenings, weekends, basically any time teachers aren't actively teaching.
That grading load, as they call it.
Exactly. And it's not just busy work. That time directly takes away from other really vital things, planning creative lessons, keeping up with professional development, or maybe most importantly, providing that one-on-one support students often need.
And that time pressure directly fuels the next problem, I imagine, the delay in feedback.
Absolutely. The source makes a strong point that feedback loses its punch over time. If a student gets a paper back, say, a week after they turned it in, well, they've likely moved on. The class is on to a new topic.
Right, the context is gone.
It's just much harder for them to really connect that feedback to what they were thinking then, to learn from their mistakes effectively. That immediate connection is lost.
That makes perfect sense. The learning moment needs to be fresh.
Yeah.
What else?
Another big one is subjectivity and inconsistency. Even with detailed rubrics, let's face it, human grading isn't perfectly objective.
You mean like how you feel that day might affect things?
Sort of. Factors like fatigue, imagine grading the 30th essay versus the first or subtle unconscious biases we all have, or even just applying the rubric slightly differently over time or between students. It can lead to inconsistencies.
Which must be really frustrating if you're the student on the receiving end.
Definitely. And it can feel unfair. And then the final point the source raises is about the depth of the feedback.
Because of the time issue again?
Precisely. Time constraints often mean that feedback, especially on complex things like essays, gets limited to, catching the surface stuff, spelling errors, grammar mistakes.
Important, but maybe not the most important things.
Right. There often just isn't the bandwidth to give those really deep constructive comments on the quality of the argument, the structure, the conceptual understanding, that nuanced feedback that really drives deeper learning.
Yeah, you just can't provide that level of insight when you're buried under a pile of papers. Okay, so that paints a clear picture of the problem space. How does AI start to chip away at this? Where does it begin, according to the source? Let's start with the simpler assessments.
Okay, so the most straightforward application, and where AI grading has been around the longest, is with objective assessments.
Multiple choice, fill in the blanks, that kind of thing.
Exactly. True-false matching. The tech here, like optical character recognition, OCR for scanning paper forms, or just processing digital answers directly, is really efficient. It's essentially pattern matching against an answer key. Very fast, very accurate for that specific task.
But the source suggests the AI can do more now than just mark right or wrong.
Yes, and this is where it gets more interesting, the AI enhancement. It's not just about the score anymore. Modern systems can immediately show the correct answers, okay, but crucially, they can link the student directly to specific learning resources tied to the questions they missed.
Ah, so if I get a question wrong about photosynthesis.
The system might instantly offer you a link to a short video explaining that process, or point you to the exact page in your online textbook. It turns that instant score into an immediate, targeted learning nudge.
That feels significantly more valuable. It's actionable feedback right away.
It is. It closes that loop much faster.
Okay, what about things that are a bit less black and white? The source calls them semi-objective, like short answer questions or maybe math problems where the process matters.
Right. For these, the AI needs more sophisticated tools. For short answers, it relies heavily on natural language processing, or NLP.
To understand the words.
Essentially, yes. The AI analyzes the student's written response. It's trained to look for key concepts, to assess semantic similarity, meaning how close is the meaning of the student's answer to a model answer, even if the wording is different.
So it's not just keyword spotting.
No, it's trying to grasp the underlying idea. And it can also check for factual accuracy against its knowledge base.
Okay, that's quite clever. And for math, you mentioned the process.
Yeah, this is incredibly valuable according to the source. Instead of just checking the final number, AI systems can be designed to validate the intermediate steps a student took to arrive at the answer.
So it can see where I went wrong.
Exactly. It can pinpoint if the error was in the setup, or a calculation mistake halfway through, or a conceptual misunderstanding at a specific stage. That kind of feedback is much more helpful for learning than just seeing a red X next to the final answer.
Definitely. Knowing where you messed up is key. Okay, now for the really complex part. The part that probably sparks the most debate. How on earth does AI attempt to grade essays and other complex written work? That feels so inherently human.
It is, and this is absolutely the frontier of AI assessment, as the source describes it. It leans on the most advanced NLP models we have today, often based on what are called transformer architectures.
Like the tech behind things like ChatGPT.
Similar underlying principles, yes. These models are powerful language processors, and the key is how they're trained. They typically learn by analyzing massive data sets, thousands, even millions of essays that have already been graded and annotated by human experts.
So they're learning to mimic human judgment based on patterns in how humans have graded in the past.
That's a good way to put it. They learn the correlations between features of the writing and the scores or comments humans assigned.
Fascinating. So what aspects of an essay can these AI systems actually evaluate, according to the source?
It breaks it down to several dimensions. First, the basics. Mechanics. Identifying errors in grammar, syntax, punctuation, spelling. That's relatively straightforward for current AI.
Okay. The proofreading aspect. What else?
Structure and cohesion. The AI looks at the overall organization. Is there a logical flow? Are the paragraphs well structured? Does the student use transitions effectively to connect ideas? It's trying to assess the scaffolding of the argument.
Right. The flow and organization. That's more complex. What about the actual content, the ideas themselves?
This is where it gets trickier, but the AI does attempt it. It analyzes the content and argumentation by looking at things like the relevance of the claims being made. Do they actually address the prompt? It assesses the quality of the evidence used. Is it relevant, sufficient? And it checks how well everything aligns with the assignment's rubric or requirements.
So it's comparing the essay's components against the prompt and rubric criteria it's been given.
Yes, based on the patterns learned during training. It's not understanding the argument in a human sense, but it's evaluating how closely the structure and content match successful examples it's seen.
And the source also mentioned clarity and style.
It did. The AI can provide feedback on sentence structure. Are sentences varied, clear? Word choice, is it precise, appropriate? And the overall readability of the text.
If you think about the big picture here, this is really pushing AI beyond simple tasks into trying to evaluate nuanced human communication.
It really is. It's attempting to quantify aspects of writing that have long been considered purely subjective.
Now, the source emphasizes that the real revolution here isn't just getting a score faster, but the kind of feedback AI can offer. What makes AI feedback different, potentially?
This is highlighted as possibly the most transformative aspect. It's about moving beyond just a grade or even a few scribbled comments to providing feedback that is instant, incredibly granular, and designed to be constructive.
Granular meaning?
Meaning very specific, often down to the sentence level. The source gives several examples of what this might look like in practice.
Okay, let's hear them. What can it actually do?
Well, an AI system can highlight specific sentences or phrases in the student's text that are particularly strong or areas that are weak.
So pinpointing examples.
Yes. And crucially, it doesn't just flag an error. It can often explain why a grammatical mistake is incorrect, maybe referencing the rule.
So it teaches rather than just corrects.
That's the goal. It can also suggest alternative phrasing to improve clarity or make a sentence more impactful. It might identify potential logical fallacies in an argument or point out exactly where more evidence or support is needed.
That sounds like having a writing tutor available 2147.
In some ways, yes. And like with the objective tests, it can provide hyperlinks directly to relevant resources, maybe a style guide section on comma usage if the student struggles with commas, or a resource on building stronger topic sentences. It's tailored to the specific weaknesses identified.
That level of immediate, specific, and resource-linked feedback sounds incredibly powerful for a student who's actually trying to learn and improve.
It has huge potential.
Okay, so if these systems are implemented thoughtfully, the source points to some major advantages. Let's break those down. First, for the students themselves, what are the key benefits highlighted?
Probably the biggest one mentioned is that immediate learning loop. Getting feedback right away while the assignment and the concepts are still fresh in your mind, that's incredibly powerful.
Right, you can act on it immediately.
Exactly. It fosters this rapid cycle of learning, revising, understanding, much more effective than getting feedback days later when you've mentally moved on.
Makes total sense.
Yeah.
What else?
Consistency and objectivity. The source stresses that an AI applies the grading rubric with perfect consistency every single time for every single student.
No fatigue, no unconscious bias.
Exactly. It removes that potential for human variability or subjectivity in applying the standards. Students can trust they're being evaluated against the same criteria as everyone else every time.
That could reduce a lot of "is this fair?" anxiety.
Potentially, yes. And related to that is the level of detail. Because the AI isn't constrained by time in the same way a human grader is.
It can be more thorough.
It can provide much more granular, often line-by-line feedback with very specific, actionable suggestions. Things a teacher might love to write but simply doesn't have time to for 30 students or 100 students.
And does this change how students approach assignments, do you think? The source mentioned mindset.
It did. It suggests AI feedback can foster a growth mindset. The ease of submitting a draft, getting instant feedback, revising based on that feedback, maybe even resubmitting.
It becomes less about a one-shot performance.
Precisely. It encourages students to see writing and learning as an iterative process of improvement, focusing less on the pressure of a single high-stakes grade and more on the journey of getting better.
I can see that. Taking the pressure off might encourage experimentation.
And that ties into the last point mentioned for students, reduced anxiety. For some, the idea of getting feedback privately from a non-judgmental algorithm rather than potentially feeling exposed or criticized by a person.
It feels safer.
It might. It could lower the anxiety around making mistakes, encouraging students to take more creative risks or try new things without that fear of immediate judgment.
So potentially quite transformative for the student experience. Faster learning, consistency, detailed help, maybe even a better mindset. What about the educators? How does the source say this tech empowers them?
For teachers, the most immediate and frankly most welcome benefit is the time savings.
That grading load we talked about.
Exactly. Automating the repetitive parts, checking multiple choice, doing initial grammar scans on essays, the source suggests this can genuinely reclaim countless hours for teachers. Hours currently spent on tasks that AI can handle efficiently.
And the key question is, what do they do with that reclaimed time?
Right. And the source is clear. It's about shifting their focus to higher value activities, the uniquely human parts of teaching.
Such as?
Designing more creative, engaging lessons, facilitating richer classroom discussions, mentoring students individually, providing targeted support to small groups who are struggling with a concept. Basically, investing that saved time where human connection, empathy, and pedagogical expertise matter most.
So it frees them up to do more teaching and less administrative grading.
That's the vision presented. And there's another benefit for teachers, too. Data insights.
The system generates reports.
Yes, these AI tools can provide powerful analytics. Teachers can get an at-a-glance overview of how the whole class is performing on specific concepts or skills.
So they can see patterns.
Exactly. They can quickly identify common misconceptions or areas where a lot of students are struggling. This allows them to adjust their teaching strategies in real time, maybe reteach a difficult concept or provide extra practice where it's needed most, informed by data from the assessments.
That data-driven insight could be really powerful for tailoring instruction. Okay, so we've heard about the potential upside. Clear benefits for both students and teachers. But, and this is a big but, the source material is very careful to highlight the significant limitations and risks. Let's start with a big one. Creativity. Can AI really assess human creativity?
This is a critical limitation the source emphasizes. As of 2025, AI systems fundamentally struggle to evaluate genuine human creativity.
What about originality? Sophisticated arguments, that unique personal voice someone might have.
All of that. Humor, nuance, profound insight. AI is good at recognizing patterns and structures it's been trained on. It can check if an essay follows a certain format or uses appropriate vocabulary, but it doesn't understand creativity or originality in a human sense. It can't appreciate a truly novel idea or a beautifully crafted, unique expression in the same way a person can.
So it might grade a technically perfect but boring essay highly and miss the brilliance in something slightly unconventional.
That's a definite risk. And it leads directly into another concern the source raises, the danger of students writing for the algorithm.
You mean trying to game the system?
Exactly. If students figure out the specific metrics the AI rewards, maybe using certain keywords, sticking to very standard sentence structures, hitting a particular length, they might optimize their writing just to get a good AI score.
At the expense of real learning.
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
At the expense of developing their own authentic voice, their critical thinking skills, their ability to write expressively and persuasively for a human audience, the focus could shift from good writing to AI-compliant writing.
That's a really worrying possibility. We want students to think critically, not just check boxes for a machine.
Yeah.
Okay, what about the ethical side? The source brings up bias and privacy. How significant are these concerns?
They're presented as major concerns. Let's take algorithmic bias first. The fundamental issue is that AI learns from data. If the training data, those thousands of human-graded essays, contains implicit biases,
Which human grading inevitably does to some extent.
right, then the AI will learn and systematize those biases. It can end up unfairly penalizing certain groups of students.
Who does the source mention might be affected?
It gives specific examples. Students who speak non-standard dialects, neurodiverse students whose writing style might be unique, or students from different cultural backgrounds where writing conventions might differ from the standard the AI was trained on.
Wow, so the AI could actually bake in and amplify existing inequalities in how students are assessed?
That's the risk. And the source explicitly flags this as a critical issue, particularly in multicultural contexts like Canada's classrooms. It requires extremely careful design, testing, and ongoing audits to mitigate.
A huge challenge. And privacy.
Equally critical, we're talking about student assignments, essays, detailed performance data generated by the AI. This is incredibly sensitive personal information.
Absolutely.
The source stresses that protecting this data is non-negotiable. Robust security measures, strict adherence to privacy laws like FIPA or PIPEDA here in Canada, ensuring data isn't misused. These have to be foundational requirements for any educational AI system. There's no room for error.
You absolutely cannot compromise student privacy. Okay, are there other risks? The source also touched on sort of oversimplifying education or losing the human touch.
Yes, two more important points. First, the risk of assessment oversimplification.
Meaning we only teach what the AI can grade.
That's the worry. If AI grading becomes widespread, will there be pressure to design curricula and assignments primarily around what the AI can easily assess? We might start de-emphasizing things like complex, open-ended projects, creative performances, debates, collaborative work.
Because they're harder for an AI to evaluate.
Exactly. But those are often the activities that foster crucial skills like critical thinking, collaboration, creativity, the very things AI struggles with. We risk narrowing the scope of education if we optimize purely for automated assessment.
Teaching to the AI test, essentially.
Yes. And finally, perhaps the most profound concern, the potential loss of the human connection and feedback.
That mentorship role you mentioned.
Right. Teacher feedback, as the source argues, is so much more than just pointing out errors. It's encouragement, it's mentorship, it's building a relationship. An empathetic comment from a teacher who knows a student, understands their struggles, their progress, that can be incredibly motivating.
Something an algorithm just can't replicate.
No. An AI can give technically correct feedback, but it can't provide that human understanding, that personalized encouragement, that sense of being seen and supported by another person. And that human element is often crucial for student motivation and development.
That resonates deeply. That connection is irreplaceable. Okay, so we have these powerful potential benefits, but also these very significant limitations and risks. Given that complex picture, what does the source material propose as the most promising path forward? How should we ideally use this technology?
The vision presented is quite clear. It's not about AI replacing teachers, it's about a symbiotic partnership.
Human-AI collaboration.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Using AI as an intelligent assistant, a tool to augment the teacher's capabilities, not to substitute for their judgment or the human connection.
How would that partnership actually work in practice, according to the source? What does the AI do, and what does the human do?
The AI takes on the role of the first-pass assistant. It handles the high-volume, more mechanical tasks, like instantly grading objective questions, performing initial checks on essays for grammar, spelling, maybe basic structure according to the rubric, highlighting potential areas of concern for the teacher to look at more closely. It does the initial sort, the heavy lifting on the more standardized elements.
Okay, so it pre-processes the work,
Yeah.
and then the teacher steps in.
Precisely. The teacher uses their valuable time and expertise for the higher-order tasks, the nuanced judgment. They review the AI's suggestions. They don't just accept them blindly. They focus their energy on providing that deep qualitative feedback on the ideas, the strength of the argument, the creativity, the originality.
The things AI struggles with.
Exactly. And crucially, the teacher adds the personal touch, the motivational comments, the context-aware feedback that only a human educator who knows the student can provide. And ultimately, the teacher makes the final holistic judgment about the student's work and understanding.
So the AI assists, but the human teaches, evaluates nuance, and makes the final call.
That's the model. What's interesting, as the source implies, is that by taking away some of the mechanical drudgery, AI might actually free up teachers to be more focused on the human aspects of teaching the mentorship, the deeper intellectual engagement.
That's a fascinating way to frame it. Okay, let's try and summarize our deep dive based on this source material. It seems clear AI-powered grading and feedback holds real promise for transforming a challenging part of education.
Definitely. The potential for giving students that instant, consistent, detailed feedback is significant. It could really accelerate learning loops.
And for educators, the prospect of alleviating that huge grading burden is incredibly appealing, freeing them up, as you said, to focus on mentorship, engagement, targeted support. The potential benefits seem quite compelling for education systems everywhere, including here in Canada.
They are, and it's a crucial but emphasized throughout the source, this is not a magic bullet. We have to be really mindful of the limitations.
Right. The AI, as it stands today, isn't a perfect judge. It struggles with creativity, nuance, genuine understanding.
And the risks are real algorithmic bias, the critical need for data privacy and security, the danger of oversimplifying curriculum.
And maybe most importantly, the need to protect and prioritize that invaluable human connection in feedback and teaching.
Absolutely. The source suggests the key is thoughtful implementation building systems that genuinely support teachers and enhance learning without letting the technology dictate pedagogy or diminish the human element.
It seems the final thought from our source material really encapsulates this. It suggests the future isn't about robotic assessment, it's about collaboration. By letting AI handle the more mechanical aspects, it empowers teachers, allows them to truly focus their energy on what matters most. Things like sparking curiosity, nurturing critical thinking, cultivating the unique potential that every student has.
It really reframes the technology as a tool to enhance, not replace, the core mission of education.
And it leaves us, and you, the listener, with a powerful question to ponder. What possibilities does that kind of human-AI partnership truly unlock for the future of learning and teaching? What could that classroom look like?
A question that really gets you thinking about the possibilities ahead.
Indeed. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. If you found this exploration of AI and assessment insightful, please do subscribe to our channel, Tech, AI, and Beyond. We'll continue to unpack fascinating topics like this in future discussions.